The rain came down in sheets, pelting against the grimy windows of the rusty lantern. The small bar where Elena worked most nights. She wiped down the counter for the third time, sighing as she glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. Long night, huh? Muttered her coworker, Tasha, tossing a wet rag into the sink. They're all long, Elena said, tying her apron tighter around her slim waist. She was used to it. Long hours, drunk customers, the occasional fight she had to dodge behind the bar. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent and kept her dream of finishing college alive. The heavy door creaked open. Elena glanced up, and her breath caught. A man stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, shaking the rain off his dark overcoat. His presence seemed to swallow the entire room. Conversation stuttered. Eyes darted toward him and then quickly away, as though looking too long might invite trouble. He moved with lethal grace, like a predator who owned whatever ground he walked on. Elena frowned, her heart thudding against her ribs. She didn't know who he was, but the way the room shifted around him told her enough. This man was dangerous. He took a seat at the far end of the bar. "Whiskey," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and commanding. She swallowed hard, reaching for the bottle. "Any particular brand? Strongest you've got." His eyes lifted, locking onto hers for the first time. Elena froze. His gaze was like steel, cold, sharp, but undeniably magnetic. For a heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. "Coming right up," she murmured, pouring the drink with steady hands. Though her pulse betrayed her calm exterior, she slid the glass toward him. He lifted it slowly, studying her over the rim before taking a sip. "What's your name?" "Elena," she answered, wary. Customers asked her name all the time, but this felt different, like it wasn't just idle conversation. "Elena," he repeated softly, as if tasting the sound. Then, with the faintest smirk, he added, "Beautiful." Heat rose in her cheeks. She busied herself with wiping the counter again, refusing to let him see how his words affected her. "Don't usually see women like you working here," he said after a pause. "And what kind of woman am I?" She shot back, meeting his eyes despite herself. "The kind who deserves more than drunks and broken jukeboxes." And those eyes, piercing, assessing, as though he already knew her deepest secrets. When the last customer stumbled out and the clock ticked past 2, he was still there, finishing his whiskey. "You're closed," she said, pulling off her apron. He stood, his height towering over her as he placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "For your trouble. That's too much. Not for a night like this." His gaze lingered on her lips before drifting back to her eyes. "Have a drink with me." She hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger. But another voice, softer and reckless, whispered just this once. "I shouldn't," she began. "Then don't think," he murmured. "One drink," she said. But one drink became 2. Laughter slipped from her lips, easing the tension as his deep voice wrapped around her like silk. Before she knew it, she was pressed against the cool wood of the counter, his hand at the small of her back, his mouth claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her lips. She didn't, and when the rain eased outside, Elena found herself tangled in the sheets of a hotel room, her heart racing with every kiss, every touch from the man whose name she still didn't know. The morning light crept in through the thin curtains, casting pale streaks across the hotel room. Elena stirred, her body aching in places she hadn't known could ache, her skin still warm from the night before. For a moment, she lay there with her eyes closed, letting herself believe it hadn't been real, that the way he'd kissed her, hungry, consuming, was just a dream, that the fire in his touch hadn't burned right through her. But when she reached out, the sheets beside her were cool. Her eyes snapped open. The other side of the bed was empty. His clothes were gone. The chair where his coat had hung was bare. He had vanished. Elena sat up, pulling the blanket against her chest as a rush of emotions hit. Confusion, embarrassment, and an ache in her heart she couldn't explain. "What did you expect?" she scolded herself. That a man like him would stay? That he'd want more than one night with a barmaid? She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, spotting a folded piece of paper on the nightstand. Her breath caught as she reached for it, her fingers trembling. It wasn't a note, just a hotel receipt. His name wasn't even on it. Her chest tightened. For some reason, the emptiness of that paper hurt more than if he'd left a cruel goodbye. "Elena, you're a fool," she whispered to herself. By the time she dressed and slipped out into the crisp morning air, the city felt different, colder. She pulled her jacket tighter and walked faster, as though the memory of him was chasing her through the streets. She didn't even know his name, and yet, she couldn't shake him. His eyes, his touch, the way he had said her name like it mattered. As she stepped onto the bus home, exhaustion crashed over her. She pressed her forehead to the window, silently promising herself that she would forget. That last night had been a mistake. A reckless, beautiful mistake. But deep down, Elena knew the truth. No matter how hard she tried, she would never forget the man who had walked into her life like a storm and disappeared just as quickly. And fate, though she didn't know it yet, wasn't finished with them. Not even close. Elena sat at the tiny kitchen table in her apartment, the morning sun streaming through the cracked blinds. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, untouched, as she stared at the small white stick in her trembling hand. 2 pink lines, her heart thudded painfully in her chest, so loud she thought the neighbors might hear it. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if denial could change what her eyes were seeing. "No, no, no." She dropped the test onto the table and buried her face in her hands. Tears pricked her eyes, but they refused to fall. This wasn't supposed to happen. It had been one night, one reckless, foolish night with a stranger whose name she still didn't know. She had convinced herself she'd forget him, bury the memory deep and move on with her life. But now a piece of him was inside her. Elena pushed back from the table, pacing the tiny kitchen. Her thoughts spun in frantic circles. She couldn't afford this. She was barely keeping her head above water. Rent overdue, tuition bills piling up, double shifts at the bar just to scrape by. How could she raise a child? Her stomach twisted, not with nausea this time, but fear. The image of his face flashed in her mind. Sharp jaw, intense eyes, the dangerous aura that clung to him like smoke. She had known he wasn't an ordinary man. The way people in the bar had gone silent when he walked in. The respect, no, the fear that followed him. Whoever he was, he lived in a world she had no place in. And now she carried his child. Elena stopped pacing and pressed her hand flat against her belly. It was still flat, unchanged, but the reality hit her with full force. "I can't tell him," she whispered into the empty room. "He can't know." The thought of him finding out sent a chill down her spine. Men like him didn't play by normal rules. What if he tried to take the baby? What if his enemies found out and used them as leverage? No, she couldn't risk it. This baby would be hers. Hers alone. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks as she sank into the chair, clutching the test in her fist. She was terrified of the future, of her mistakes, of the unknown man whose blood now tied him to her forever. But as she wiped her eyes, a fierce determination lit inside her. She would raise this child. She would give them the love and safety she never had growing up. She might have made a mistake with him, but this baby was no mistake. This baby was her secret, and no one, not even the man whose shadow still haunted her dreams, could ever take that away. Elena never imagined how quickly life could change. The weeks that followed her discovery blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Morning sickness became her constant companion, striking at the worst possible moments. Behind the bar during a rush, on the bus ride home, even in the middle of class. At night, alone in her tiny apartment, she sat with her hands resting on her stomach, whispering promises to the little life growing inside her. "I don't know how we're going to do this," she confessed softly one evening, her voice trembling. "But I swear, I'll protect you, no matter what." The fear never fully left her. Bills piled up on the counter, each envelope another reminder of how unprepared she was. She picked up extra shifts, sacrificing sleep to scrape together rent and tuition. Her professors noticed her distracted eyes, her unfinished assignments. Still, she kept going, because giving up wasn't an option anymore. As the months passed, her belly began to swell. She bought loose sweaters from thrift stores, doing her best to hide the truth. But by the 6th month, there was no hiding it. The whispers started at work. Customers stared. Some smirked, others pitted. Even Tasha confronted her one night after closing. "Elena," she said gently, her arms crossed. "You're pregnant." Elena froze, her throat tight. "It's complicated." Tasha sighed and pulled her into a hug. "Then I'll help. Whatever you need." The kindness nearly broke Elena in half. For so long, she had carried this burden alone. Hearing someone say "you're not alone" felt like sunlight through storm clouds. By the time her due date crept closer, Elena had prepared as best she could. A second-hand crib in the corner of her bedroom. Baby clothes folded neatly in a drawer. A few bottles and blankets stacked on the dresser. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And when the night came, when the contractions tore through her and she cried out in the cold hospital room, she clung to the thought of her child. The pain, the fear, the loneliness. All of it faded the moment she heard that first cry. The nurse placed a tiny, wriggling boy in her arms. Elena sobbed, holding him close, her heart overflowing. "Hi, baby," she whispered, pressing her lips to his damp forehead. "It's just you and me now, and I promise, I'll never let anyone hurt you." In that moment, all her struggles, all her fears, were worth it. She had her son, her secret, her reason to fight. 6 years later, Elena tugged at the small hand clasped in hers as she hurried down the busy city street. The late afternoon air buzzed with honking horns and the chatter of crowds, but her focus stayed on the little boy trotting beside her. "Hold on tight, Leo," she reminded, her voice warm but firm. "I am Mama," he said proudly, clutching his action figure in the other hand. His dark hair stuck out in unruly tufts, his bright brown eyes sparkling with excitement. Elena smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. He was the center of her world, the one thing that made every struggle worth it. Even on days when money was tight and exhaustion nearly broke her, one look at him made it all fade away. They ducked into a small grocery store, Elena's list folded neatly in her pocket. She balanced her budget with precision: milk, bread, rice, a few vegetables. Every coin mattered. Leo was bouncing near the candy aisle when Elena's body suddenly went rigid. She turned her head and froze. There he was, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an immaculately tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. The years had only sharpened him, his jawline harder, his presence even more commanding. He was speaking quietly to a man in black at his side, but as if sensing her gaze, his head turned. Their eyes met. Elena's breath caught. Her pulse hammered so hard she thought she might faint. It was him, the man she had spent 6 years trying to erase from memory, the man who had given her Leo without ever knowing it. And in that instant, she saw the flicker in his eyes, recognition. He strode toward her, the crowd parting instinctively in his wake. Elena's instinct screamed run, but her feet refused to move. Leo looked up at her, confused. "Ma?" he whispered. The man stopped just feet away, his gaze dropping briefly to the child gripping her hand. His eyes narrowed, then widened. Shock cracked his carefully composed mask. The resemblance was undeniable. The boy's dark hair, the sharp curve of his nose, the same piercing eyes. "Yours?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. Elena swallowed hard, clutching Leo closer. "Stay behind me, sweetheart," she whispered to her son before meeting the man's gaze. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "Yes, he's mine." A heavy silence fell between them, thick with unspoken truth. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a storm of emotions. Anger, disbelief, something raw she couldn't name. He took a step closer, his voice a growl. "You hid this from me." Elena's heart pounded as she shielded Leo with her body. I had to. I couldn't let him be part of your world. For a moment the mafia boss, the man feared by all, looked utterly undone. His gaze shifted back to Leo, who stared up at him curiously, unaware of the storm brewing around him. And in that instant, something unspoken passed between father and son. His gaze was sharp, unyielding, pinning her in place like a predator cornering its prey. 6 years, he said, his voice low but hard, each word like steel. You kept him from me for 6 years. Elena's chest tightened. She bent down slightly, keeping Leo behind her, shielding him instinctively. Lower your voice, she hissed. This isn't the place. His jaw clenched, but he leaned closer, his presence overwhelming. You think you can disappear with my child, and then decide where the conversation happens? Leo peeked out from behind Elena's leg. Mama, who's he? Elena's heart nearly broke. She stroked his hair quickly, forcing a calm smile. No one, baby. Just someone Mama used to know. The man's eyes flicked to Leo again, and this time, something raw crossed his face. Possession, fury, and beneath it all, a flash of vulnerability he couldn't hide. He straightened, his tone sharp. We're not doing this here. You're coming with me. Elena bristled. No, you don't get to walk back into my life after one night and start making demands. You think this is about you? His voice dropped to a growl. It's not. It's about him. He pointed subtly toward Leo. My son. My blood. You had no right to keep him from me. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. Fear and anger warred inside her. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had no idea what it had been like. Raising a child alone, counting coins to keep a roof over their heads. But Leo's wide, confused eyes silenced her. She turned, gripping the cart. Come on, Leo. We're leaving. But the man stepped in front of her, blocking the path. You can try to run again, Elena, he said, voice low and cold. But this time I will find you. And when I do, you won't be able to keep him from me. Her breath caught. Why? She demanded, her whisper trembling. Why do you even care? You don't know him. You don't know me. That night meant nothing. For a long moment, he just stared at her, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing. Then he leaned down, his voice barely audible, but laced with something dangerous and real. It meant everything. Elena froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. Before she could respond, Leo tugged at her hand, breaking the charged silence. Mama, can we go home? Her throat tightened. She nodded quickly, tugging her son away. The man didn't stop her this time, but his gaze burned into her back as they left the store. She knew, without a doubt, that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Elena slammed the grocery bags down on the counter, her hands shaking. Leo was humming to himself in the living room, completely unaware of the storm brewing in his mother's chest. She leaned against the sink, staring out at the cracked brick wall beyond her kitchen window. He had found her. After 6 years of carefully avoiding the shadows, of keeping her life small and quiet, he had stepped back into it as if no time had passed. And worse, he had seen Leo. Her secret was no longer safe. The next day, she dropped Leo off at school, kissing his forehead before watching him run into the gates. Relief washed over her. At least he was safe for a few hours. But as she turned back toward the street, her relief curdled into dread. A sleek black car idled across the road. The tinted window rolled down, and there he was, leaning back in the leather seat like a king surveying his territory. Get in, he said. Elena stiffened. Absolutely not. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. You always were stubborn. Leave me alone, she hissed, keeping her voice low so the other parents wouldn't hear. I told you. I don't want you near him. You don't get to decide that anymore, he said calmly, but his eyes gleamed with a dangerous promise. He's my son. I'll be in his life, with or without your blessing. Her pulse jumped. You're a criminal. Do you want me to expose him to your enemies? To your world of blood and guns? His gaze hardened, but his voice dropped to something almost tender. I want to protect him, to protect you. Don't you get it? The moment I saw him, something in me shifted. He's mine, and I won't let anyone touch what's mine. Elena's throat went dry. She spun on her heel and walked away, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her shake. But he didn't stop. He showed up outside her work the following night, sitting at a corner table as she served drinks. His presence silenced the rowdiest customers, his dark gaze never leaving her. When she stepped outside after her shift, he was leaning against his car, waiting. Get used to it, he said when she tried to walk past him. I'm not going anywhere. Days later, Leo came running out of school with a wide grin, clutching a brand new backpack. Look, Mama, he beamed. A man gave me this. He said he was a friend. Elena's blood ran cold. She scanned the street, and there he was, watching from a distance, his hands in his pockets. Their eyes locked, and he tipped his head slightly, as if to say, try and stop me. That night, Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling, her son asleep beside her. He wasn't going to give up. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the way he hovered just out of reach but always close enough to remind her of his power, that he was relentless. And deep down, the most terrifying truth of all wasn't that he wanted Leo. It was that a part of her, the part that still remembered his touch, his voice whispering her name, was afraid she didn't want him to stop. The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeped through Elena's coat as she hurried home with Leo. The street lamps flickered, throwing uneasy shadows across the narrow alley she sometimes cut through to save time. Leo tugged at her hand, skipping along. Mama, can we have pancakes tomorrow? She smiled faintly despite her nerves. We'll see, sweetheart. Depends if Mama can find eggs on sale. They were halfway down the alley when footsteps echoed behind them. Elena stiffened. She quickened her pace, pulling Leo closer. The footsteps grew louder, faster. Her pulse raced. She turned the corner and froze. 3 men blocked the exit. Rough-looking, their eyes sharp and hungry. One smirked, showing a gold tooth. Well, he drawled. Pretty lady, walking alone this late? I'm not interested, Elena said quickly, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. Let us through. The men laughed. One stepped forward, his gaze sliding to Leo. Cute kid. Shame to drag him into this. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She shoved Leo behind her, her arms spread wide. Stay back. The men closed in. Panic clawed at her throat. She had no weapon, no one to call. And then a voice, cold and lethal, cut through the night. Touch them, and you're dead. The men froze. From the shadows he stepped forward, towering, terrifying, his presence consuming the alley. His black coat billowed slightly in the wind, and though he carried no weapon in sight, the promise of violence radiated off him. The gold-toothed man sneered, trying to mask his fear. And who the hell are you supposed to be? The mafia boss didn't answer. He simply moved, fast, precise. In seconds, one man was slammed against the wall, choking on a grunt of pain. Another staggered back as a fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. The third bolted without looking back. Elena clutched Leo tightly, her breath shallow as she watched. The fight was brutal, efficient, and terrifyingly controlled. Within moments, the alley was silent except for the groans of the 2 men sprawled on the ground. He turned, his chest rising and falling steadily, his eyes locking on hers. For the first time since that night 6 years ago, Elena wasn't sure if she should fear him or thank him. Leo peeked out from behind her, eyes wide. Mama, he saved us. Her heart cracked. She nodded slowly, her voice soft. Yes, he did. The mafia boss's gaze softened almost imperceptibly as he crouched to Leo's level. For once, there was no intimidation in his posture. Just something raw, something human. You okay, little man? He asked quietly. Leo nodded, clutching his toy soldier to his chest. Yeah, thanks, mister. The man's jaw tightened. You don't need to thank me. It's my job to keep you safe. His eyes flicked to Elena, and his voice dropped lower. Both of you. Elena's throat tightened, her walls threatening to crumble under the weight of those words. She wanted to tell him to stay away, to insist she didn't need him. But the memory of those men, their hungry eyes, the danger she couldn't fight off alone, it all silenced her. For the first time, she whispered what she swore she'd never say. Come inside. The apartment was small, humble, a world away from the marble halls and chandeliers he was accustomed to. The walls were painted a faded cream, a hand-drawn picture of a smiling sun taped above the couch. The scent of lavender detergent clung to the air. He stood just inside the doorway, broad shoulders filling the frame, his dark presence almost too big for the room. Elena set down her keys and hung her coat, glancing back at him nervously. Leo had already dashed into the living room, digging through a box of toy cars. You can sit, she said stiffly, nodding at the couch. He lowered himself onto it, the springs creaking under his weight. For a moment he simply studied the space. The single lamp, the stack of bills half hidden on the counter, the worn blanket draped over the armrest. It was modest, too modest for the woman and child who should have had more. His chest tightened. Leo toddled over, clutching a bright red car. His curious eyes studied the man. Do you like cars? Caught off guard, he hesitated. Yes. Which one's your favorite? Leo asked eagerly, holding up two, one blue, one green. A muscle in his jaw ticked. He wasn't used to children, to these kinds of innocent tests. In his world, questions had consequences. Choices meant blood. But here, he forced his hand steady, pointing at the blue. That one, he said. Leo's face lit up. Mine too. He plopped onto the floor and began pushing the car across the rug. After a beat, he looked up expectantly. Wanna play? The mafia boss blinked. Play? He hadn't played since he was a boy himself, long before he'd learned to fight for survival. But Leo's eyes, wide and trusting, left no room for refusal. Slowly, almost awkwardly, he lowered himself to the floor. Elena watched from the kitchen, arms crossed. Her son's laughter filled the air as the most feared man in the city pushed a toy car across a frayed rug, his movements stiff but genuine. Later, while Leo was brushing his teeth before bed, Elena leaned against the counter, watching him. You don't know what you're doing, do you? She said softly. He met her gaze, unflinching. No, but I'm trying. Her throat tightened. For a moment, the hardness in him softened, stripped bare. He wasn't the ruthless boss everyone whispered about. He was just a man fumbling with a role he'd never been taught to play. Trying isn't enough, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Leo doesn't need chaos in his life. He needs stability. He needs love. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. And I can give him that. I can give both of you that. You just have to let me. Her heart slammed in her chest. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the danger of his world hovered like a shadow. Leo's little voice carried from the bathroom. Mama, can he tuck me in? Elena froze. Slowly, she turned to look at him. His eyes had softened completely now, a quiet plea shining in them. Without a word, she nodded. He entered Leo's room, the dim glow of the nightlight casting warmth across the walls. He sat at the edge of the bed, awkwardly smoothing the blanket over the boy. Leo snuggled close to his toy soldier, smiling sleepily. Good night, Dad. Leo mumbled, his voice slurred with drowsiness. The word hit him like a blade and a bomb all at once. His chest ached with something fierce and unfamiliar. Good night, son, he whispered back. Elena stood outside the doorway, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in 6 years, she wasn't sure if keeping them apart was the right thing to do. The mansion felt emptier than ever. Days passed, but neither of them spoke much. Elena moved like a ghost through the halls, tending to Leo, avoiding his gaze. And he, the man the underworld feared, found himself afraid of a silence he couldn't control. The world outside still demanded his attention. Calls came in, coded threats, and names whispered through static. His empire was bleeding. Rivals were circling, waiting for him to fall. But every time he looked at Leo, at that small face so much like his own. Something inside him shifted. One night, he stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights. Rain fell again, soft this time, blurring the skyline. Behind him, Elena's voice broke the quiet. Are you really going to choose them over us? He turned slowly. She stood barefoot, wrapped in one of his shirts, eyes red from sleepless nights. Elena, he began, but she cut him off. You can't keep both. The guns, the blood, the empire, or Leo and me. It's one or the other. He clenched his fists. If I walk away, they'll come for me. For you. You think it's that simple? It is that simple, she said softly. Love or power, peace or war. You just have to decide which one you can live without. He looked at her for a long time, the woman who had once been a one-night mistake, now the only thing that felt real. In the silence, he imagined it, the normal life she wanted. Morning sunlight instead of gunfire. Leo's laughter instead of orders shouted over the phone. A life without blood on his hands. And for the first time, he wanted it. The decision came not with words, but with action. He picked up his phone, dialed a number that had built his world, and began tearing it down. Transfer everything, he ordered. Accounts, properties, all of it. Then disappear. There was panic on the other end. Boss, are you? He ended the call. When he turned back to Elena, his voice was steady, quiet. I'm done. Tears filled her eyes. Are you sure? He nodded. They can have the empire. I just want my family. She stepped closer, touching his hand, and for the first time in years he felt like a man, not a monster. But as thunder rolled again outside, a shadow crossed his face. He knew walking away wouldn't come without a price. He had made his choice. Now he'd have to survive. It happened at dawn. The city was still sleeping when the past came knocking. Engines roared outside the mansion gates. Black SUVs, tinted windows, men armed and ready. The empire he'd abandoned had come to collect its debt. He woke before the noise reached them. Instinct. Years of survival. One glance out the window told him everything. They've found us, he whispered. Elena shot up, panic flashing in her eyes. Leo, I'll get him. Stay low. Don't leave this room. But she caught his arm before he could move. You said it was over. He looked at her. Tired, torn, but resolute. It is. For you. I'll make sure of it. Then he was gone. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Bullets split the morning air. He moved like a ghost through the smoke. Calculated, ruthless, unstoppable. Every shot he fired was a promise kept. Every hit a reminder of who he used to be. One of his men fell beside him. Another screamed orders. But he kept moving forward, fueled by one thought. They won't touch them. Inside, Elena held Leo close, praying the noise would stop, that he'd come back through that door. Each gunshot tore through her chest like it was her own heartbeat breaking. Then silence. A single, heavy silence. When she finally stepped outside, the sun was rising, soft gold light cutting through smoke. Bodies lay still. The air smelled of iron and gunpowder. And there he was, on his knees in the gravel, blood staining his shirt, a gun still clenched in his hand. Elena ran to him, falling beside him, voice breaking. No, no, no. Stay with me, please. He smiled weakly, eyes finding hers. You're safe. That's all that matters. Tears fell onto his face. Don't you dare leave me now. He reached up, brushing her cheek with a trembling hand. I told you, I'd protect you, even if it killed me. She shook her head, sobbing. You don't get to die after finally choosing us. He let out a faint laugh, the sound breaking apart like smoke. Then I guess I'm not done yet. Sirens wailed in the distance, police, ambulance, maybe salvation. Elena pressed her hand against his wound, whispering over and over, stay with me, and somehow he did. Weeks later, sunlight through clean windows, Leo's laughter echoing through a smaller, quieter home far from the city. He sat on the porch, still healing, scars hidden beneath a white shirt. When Elena came out with coffee, he smiled, the kind of smile that didn't belong to a mafia boss anymore. You're thinking about it again, she said softly. He nodded. Everything I lost. Then he looked at her. And everything I gained. She smiled back. You made your choice. He reached for her hand. No, you were the choice. The house was small, sunlit, and quiet. No guards. No locked gates. Just birds, wind, and peace. Elena stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching Leo chase butterflies across the garden. His laughter carried through the morning air, pure, bright, unburdened. Behind her, strong arms wrapped around her waist. His voice, rough but calm, brushed her ear. Every time I see him smile, I remember why I walked away. She turned, meeting his eyes, softer now, free of the cold steel they once held. And do you regret it? He shook his head. Not once. The scar at his collar caught the sunlight, a quiet reminder of everything they'd survived. She reached up, tracing it gently. You finally kept your promise, she whispered. He smiled. You made it worth keeping. Outside, Leo called out for them to come play. She laughed, pulling his hand toward the door. For the first time, they stepped into the sunlight together. Not running, not hiding, just living. The world still whispered his name somewhere far away. But here, he was no longer the boss, no longer the legend. Just a man, loved, forgiven, home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to leave us a comment. Also like, share and subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell to get notified when a new story comes up. Don't forget to tell us where you are watching from.